The box arrived on a wet Tuesday morning with Ryan Chang's name printed above the return address and no note inside. Judith Brady saw it on the front step when she came back from the bank. The bottom had gone soft in the rain. One corner leaned toward the porch boards, and a strip of clear tape had peeled loose across the top. She stood over it with her purse tucked under one arm. $8,412 remained in the accounts that had once held her retirement, Leonard's life insurance, and nearly 40 years of careful saving. That was the number the bank manager had written on a yellow pad before turning it around. The missing amount was harder to look at. Approximately $210,000 had been moved out over 5 years. Most of it had gone through something Ryan called the Chong Family Investment Fund. There was no fund. There had never been one. Judith had nodded while the manager explained this. She'd signed 2 forms, taken a fraud packet, and walked through the lobby without looking at anyone. Now, Ryan had sent her a box. She nudged it with the toe of her shoe. Something wicker scraped against cardboard. Kimberly had warned her it was coming. "He found a few more of your things," she'd said over the phone. "Or his lawyer found them." "I don't know. They were in storage after the house sold. My house." "I know, Mom." Judith had held the phone away from her face for a moment. Kimberly always said she knew now. She knew Ryan had lied. She knew the power of attorney should have been canceled. She knew the investment statements were fake. She knew Judith had never agreed to sell the little house on West 9th Street. Knowing after the fact was becoming a crowded business. Judith bent carefully, caught the dry side of the box, and carried it inside the furnished duplex Kimberly had rented for her. It had beige walls, brown carpet, and a kitchen clock shaped like a coffee cup. Nothing in it belonged to Judith except a suitcase beside the bedroom door and 3 grocery bags of clothes. She set the box on the kitchen table. Water marked the fake wood in a dark square. A pair of Leonard's work gloves lay on top. Under those was Judith's blue casserole dish without its lid, a packet of photographs held together with a rubber band, and 2 mismatched coffee mugs. One had Scott's name printed across it in faded red letters. The other came from a hospital billing conference Judith had attended in Lincoln. At the bottom sat Leonard's fishing creel. It was a battered wicker basket with a flattened side and a leather strap gone stiff from age. Gray mildew dotted the lid. One brass buckle was missing. Ryan had wrapped nothing around it. He'd dropped it into the box like something found at the back of a garage. Judith lifted it with both hands. The creel smelled faintly of damp canvas, lake mud, and the menthol ointment Leonard used on his hands. 7 years had passed since he'd died, but that smell brought the cabin dock back so quickly that Judith had to set the creel down. She pulled out a chair. Rain ticked against the kitchen window. The refrigerator clicked off, leaving the room quiet. Leonard had carried that basket every spring from the first warm weekend until the cottonwoods turned. He kept hooks in an old tobacco tin, sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper, and a small red towel that was never clean. Judith used to complain when he put the creel on the dining table. "Fish scales," she'd say. "Evidence of honest work," Leonard would answer. "Fishing isn't work. You haven't seen me do it properly." She could hear him saying it, not like a ghost, more like a person remembered accurately. Judith opened the lid. The tobacco tin was gone. So was the towel. A few dry pine needles clung to the canvas liner. There was nothing else inside. Ryan had drained the accounts, sold her house, and left her Leonard's empty fishing creel. Judith sat there until the rain slowed. Then she carried the box into the bedroom and put the creel beside her suitcase. That was what remained. 7 years earlier, when Leonard died on the dock at Lake McConaughey, Judith hadn't known how much of her life he quietly managed. He paid the insurance. He tracked the property taxes. He made lists before they drove to the cabin and kept receipts in labeled envelopes. Judith understood hospital accounts and could find a coding error on a page full of numbers, but at home, she let Leonard handle their papers. It wasn't obedience. It was division of labor. She cooked because Leonard could burn canned soup. He handled money because he enjoyed a clean ledger. On the morning he died, Judith was inside the cabin washing 2 coffee cups. Leonard and Eugene Luna were supposed to check the dock supports before taking the boat out. She heard Eugene shout once. By the time she reached the water, Leonard was lying on his back across the weathered boards. Eugene knelt beside him with one hand beneath Leonard's neck. The fishing creel had fallen open near the bench. A jar of bait rolled slowly against a dock cleat each time the water moved. "Call," Eugene said. "Judith, call now." She did. Eugene kept trying until the ambulance arrived. The paramedics tried too. Judith watched from the bank with Leonard's jacket clutched against her chest. At the hospital in Ogallala, a doctor with tired eyes told her it had been a major heart attack. He said Leonard probably hadn't felt much pain. People like to offer that detail. They thought it gave grief a softer edge. Ryan drove from Lincoln that night with Kimberly. Scott called from Denver and arrived the following afternoon. Doris Newman closed her bait shop early and brought enough food for 12 people. Judith remembered very little about the funeral. She remembered Ryan fastening the clasp on her necklace because her fingers wouldn't manage it. She remembered Kimberly taking her shoes off when they got home. She remembered Scott standing alone near the garage, talking into his phone while everyone else carried dishes inside. For the first few months, Ryan was useful in ways Judith couldn't deny. He called the insurance company. He found Leonard's pension forms. He made a folder for bills that needed immediate attention and another for papers that could wait. When Judith forgot a meeting, Ryan rescheduled it. When she left the bank without her checkbook, he drove back and collected it. He spoke slowly without sounding impatient. Kimberly watched him do these things and felt relieved. Her mother had always been the capable one. Seeing Judith stare at unopened envelopes frightened her more than she admitted. One evening, Ryan spread several documents across Judith's dining table. "This would let me help without you signing something every week," he said. Judith looked at the bold words at the top. "Financial power of attorney. For how long? As long as you want. You can cancel it." Kimberly sat beside him with a cup of tea between her hands. "It doesn't give him your money, Mom. It just lets him deal with the bank and insurance people. I can deal with a bank." "Of course you can," Ryan said. "This is for the days you don't want to." That sounded reasonable. Everything Ryan said that year sounded reasonable. Judith signed. She was 57 then, newly widowed, tired enough to forget whether she'd eaten lunch. She believed she was giving a trusted family member permission to stand beside her. She didn't understand that he was learning where every dollar sat. The first transfer happened the following year. Ryan described it as a conservative family investment. He said Kimberly and Scott could eventually participate. The money would earn more than Judith's savings account without being exposed to much risk. "How much are we talking about?" Judith asked. "Start small. See how you feel?" He moved $12,000. A month later, he brought her a printed statement showing a modest gain. Judith filed it in Leonard's old cabinet. The next transfer was larger. Then came repairs Ryan said he'd paid for on her behalf, tax planning fees, and temporary loans that never looked temporary when the bank finally laid them out in order. He spread the withdrawals across 5 years. He moved enough at a time to matter, but not enough to frighten her. When Judith asked why her balance seemed low, he showed her the investment statements. "Your money hasn't disappeared," he said. "It's working." Kimberly believed him too. That mattered to Judith. Kimberly was careful with receipts, careful with appointments, careful about who serviced her car. If she trusted Ryan, Judith saw no reason not to. Scott wanted no part of family finances. Whenever Judith mentioned paperwork, he said, "That's Ryan's world." He called on holidays and sometimes on Sunday afternoons. He was busy building a sales territory in Colorado. He had flights, meetings, quarterly targets, and a way of making any requests sound like poor timing. The cabin interested him even less. "Sell the leaky shack," he told Judith more than once. "You're paying county fees on land you don't even own." Judith believed the cabin stood on a shoreline lot leased through the county. Leonard had always referred to the yearly payment as the lake fee. After his death, Ryan handled it. Yower said he did. Judith rarely went back. For the first 2 years, she couldn't imagine walking down that dock. Later, there was always another reason. The roof needed work. The water line had to be checked. Ryan said the place was becoming unsafe. Eugene called every spring. "I can open it up," he'd offer. "Not this year. You don't have to stay long." "I said not this year, Eugene." He never argued after that. He checked the windows, cleared fallen branches, and sent Judith photographs she often left unopened. By autumn of 2025, Ryan had started making mistakes. He used to remember every explanation he gave. Then 2 statements showed different balances for the same investment. Kimberly noticed because she was gathering financial records for a mortgage refinance. She asked Ryan about it at their kitchen counter. He didn't look up from his phone. One's before the quarterly adjustment. "They have the same date. Then one's a draft." "Which one?" Ryan sighed. "Kim, I've had a long day." She almost let it go. She had let many things go when he sounded tired. Instead, she took both statements to the den and compared them with the copies on his computer. The company logo on the pages belonged to a real brokerage, but the account number didn't exist. The telephone number at the bottom led to a prepaid mobile phone in Ryan's desk drawer. Kimberly sat on the carpet with the phone in her lap. For the first time, she understood that Ryan's calmness wasn't proof of honesty. It was a method. She called Judith the next morning. "Mom, I need you to come over." Judith was still living in the small West 9th Street house then. She drove across town expecting an argument about Christmas plans. Kimberly opened the door before Judith knocked. Her face looked swollen, though she denied she'd been crying. Ryan's clothes were gone from the bedroom. 2 drawers in the den hung open. The computer tower had disappeared from beneath the desk. What happened? Kimberly locked the door behind her mother. "I think Ryan took money from you." Judith heard the sentence, but her mind changed one word. Borrowed. Ryan had borrowed money? How much? I don't know. Call him. I have. Call him again. Kimberly did. The call went straight to voicemail. Judith stood beside the dining table, where Ryan had first placed the power of attorney forms 6 years earlier. She noticed a coffee ring on the wood. She rubbed it with her thumb until Kimberly touched her wrist. "Mom?" "He'll explain." Kimberly closed her eyes. "He closed our joint account yesterday. His office says he quit 3 weeks ago. I found emails about your house." "What emails?" The sale papers were already signed. Ryan had used Judith's financial authority to arrange a cash sale of her house through a property buyer. The closing was scheduled for the following week. He'd told the buyer Judith was moving permanently, and had authorized him to handle everything. Judith hadn't authorized the sale. She hadn't known the house was listed. Her name appeared on documents she didn't remember signing. The signature resembled hers, but it leaned too far to the right. The sale should have stopped there. It didn't. Ryan had attached the power of attorney document and sworn that the transaction benefited Judith. By the time Kimberly found the emails, the buyer had already taken possession rights under the contract and sold an interest to another company. Lawyers became involved. So did the bank and local police. The sale proceeds were frozen briefly, then swallowed by competing claims and the false investment account Ryan had already emptied. Judith spent months answering questions about her own money. Had she approved this transfer? Had she received that statement? Had Ryan ever threatened her? No, he hadn't threatened her. That almost made it worse. He'd brought groceries. He'd changed furnace filters. He'd sat beside her after Leonard died and said she wouldn't have to face everything alone. Kimberly filed for divorce. Ryan disappeared from regular contact and communicated through an attorney. He claimed the investments had failed. He claimed Judith understood the risk. He claimed the house sale had been necessary because she could no longer maintain it. Judith was 64, not incapable. Still, the explanations went into files. Once words entered a legal file, they seemed to acquire weight just by being stapled together. The divorce became final early the next year. Kimberly recovered little. Judith recovered less. Her bank froze Ryan's access, but there was almost nothing left to protect. Scott called after Kimberly told him the estimated loss. "How could you sign that much control over to him?" he asked. Judith held the phone without answering. Scott seemed to realize what he'd said. "I mean, Mom, didn't the bank warn you? The bank accepted it. But you worked in billing. You know paperwork." "Yes." He cleared his throat. "Have you thought about selling the cabin? Whatever's there has to be worth something. It's leased land. The structure might bring a little. It needs a roof. Then maybe you walk away. No point throwing good money after bad." Judith ended the call politely. She always ended calls politely, even when the other person had earned a dial tone. 2 weeks later, Ryan's box arrived. That afternoon, Judith took inventory. She had $8,412 in the bank. She had a monthly pension payment large enough for groceries, utilities, and careful rent, but not enough to rebuild what was gone. She owned a 12-year-old sedan with a cracked rear light. Her furniture was either sold with the house, held in storage, or missing. She had Leonard's gloves, the broken casserole dish, 2 mugs, some photographs, and the fishing creel. Kimberly came by after work and found the contents spread across the bed. "I'm sorry," she said. Judith folded one of Leonard's shirts. It had been in her suitcase since she left the house. "You've said that?" "I know." "Then don't say it again today." Kimberly sat on the edge of the mattress. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Kimberly picked up the creel. He sent this? It was in the box. Why would he even have it? Your father kept it in the garage. I thought everything from the garage went into storage. So did I. Kimberly ran a finger over the mildewed wicker. I can throw it out. Judith took it from her. No, I only meant because of the mold. I know what you meant. Kimberly looked toward the suitcase. Are you going somewhere? Judith placed the creel on the bed. The cabin. Mom, Scott said, it's in terrible shape. Scott hasn't been there in 9 years. Ryan said the roof was leaking. Ryan said a great many things. That stopped them both. Judith opened the closet and took out her raincoat. She had made no plan before speaking. Now that the words existed, the plan began forming around them. She would drive north. She would see what the cabin needed. She would find the county paperwork and learn whether any lease payment remained due. If the place truly had no future, she would close it herself. She wouldn't let Ryan's last description decide what Leonard's cabin was worth. Kimberly stood. I'll come with you. No? Why not? Because you have work. Because your divorce ended 3 weeks ago. Because I need one decision that doesn't begin with somebody helping me. Kimberly's mouth tightened. Judith didn't enjoy hurting her. She also didn't take the words back. I can at least pay for the gas, Kimberly said. I have gas money. Mom, bring me the storage key instead. Kimberly studied her face, then nodded. The following morning, Judith packed 2 pairs of work pants, a sweater, food for 3 days, a flashlight, Leonard's gloves, and the fraud packet from the bank. She put the fishing creel on the passenger seat. The drive from Ogallala to Otter Creek Road wasn't long, but she took it slowly. Spring wind moved sand across the highway in thin pale ribbons. Lake McConaughey appeared beyond the fields, broad and blue beneath a low sky. Judith kept both hands on the wheel. She hadn't seen the cabin since the morning Leonard died. At the turnoff, the road narrowed. Cottonwood branches scraped the roof of the car. The last stretch was rutted badly enough that Judith had to steer around standing water. Then, the cabin came into view. It leaned less than she'd feared. The porch sagged at one corner. A section of gutter hung loose, and the roof showed a dark patch near the chimney. Weeds had swallowed the path to the dock. Judith parked beside the woodshed and turned off the engine. Wind pressed softly against the car. The creel rested on the passenger seat, empty as far as she knew, carrying nothing except the smell of a life Ryan had considered worthless. Judith picked up the cabin keys. She took the creel with her, crossed the wet yard, and climbed the porch steps to learn what else had been left behind. The first key fit, but the lock wouldn't turn. Judith tried again with her shoulder against the door. The key moved halfway and stopped. She could hear something dragging across the floor inside. She set the creel on the porch, pulled on Leonard's gloves, and worked the key back and forth. The lock finally gave, with a sharp click. When she pushed, the door opened 6 inches and struck whatever lay behind it. Judith leaned into the gap. A pine branch had come through the front window and knocked over the narrow coat rack. One of Leonard's old jackets was tangled beneath it. She reached through, caught the rack by one leg, and pulled until she could open the door. The air inside smelled of wet wood and mouse droppings. A dark stain ran down the wall beneath the broken window. Leaves covered one end of the braided rug. Judith picked up the jacket. It was Leonard's green canvas coat, the one with a burn mark near the left cuff. She shook glass from it and hung it over the back of a chair. Then she stood in the middle of the room and looked. The cabin was untidy, but it hadn't collapsed. The ceiling remained level. The floor felt solid beneath her boots. The dark patch near the fireplace looked recent, and a metal cooking pot sat beneath it with 2 inches of brown water inside. Ryan had called the building dangerous. Judith had imagined rotten walls and a roof open to the sky. What she found was a broken window, a leak, and several winters of neglect. Those weren't the same thing. She carried her suitcase inside and placed the creel on the kitchen counter. Then she opened every curtain. Gray daylight filled the room. Leonard had built the cabin as one long rectangle with 2 small bedrooms at the back. The kitchen occupied one corner. A stone fireplace faced a sofa, whose cushions had been wrapped in old sheets. The dining table stood beneath a window overlooking the lake. His hands were everywhere once Judith started paying attention. The cabinet doors didn't quite match because Leonard had made the first 3 before finding better lumber. Pencil marks showed beneath the windowsill, where he'd measured twice and still cut a board short. A wooden plug covered a knot in the floor near the stove. Judith could remember teasing him about that plug. "Nobody will notice it," he'd said. "I noticed it. You were looking for it." Now she touched the smooth circle with the toe of her boot. The electricity was off. The kitchen faucet coughed air when she turned it. A wall thermometer showed the room only a few degrees warmer than outside. Shelter, water, and heat. Those came before memories. Judith found the electrical panel near the back door. The main switch was already on, which meant the service had been disconnected elsewhere. She checked the propane tank through the kitchen window. Its gauge sat near 1/4. The wood box beside the fireplace held 6 dry logs and a nest Amos had made from an oven mitt. Judith carried the nest outside. She brought in split wood from the shed, cleared the flue, and laid a small fire. Leonard had taught both children to build one without lighter fluid. Neither had been interested for long. The first match went out. The second caught the newspaper. Kindling snapped, then the dry logs began to burn. Heat spread slowly. Judith found a broom, swept leaves and glass into a dustpan, and covered the broken window with a flattened cardboard box from the car. It wasn't pretty, but it stopped the wind. By noon, she had one room warm enough to sit in. Water was next. The cabin used a well pump house beneath a wooden cover near the back steps. Judith disconnected the power before opening it. Mud surrounded the pressure tank, and one coupling had split during a freeze. She knew what the part was. She didn't have a replacement. There was a hand pump beside the woodshed, installed years ago for outages. Its handle resisted twice, then moved. After several strokes, rusty water spilled from the spout. Judith kept pumping until it ran clear. She filled a bucket and carried it inside. Her back complained halfway across the yard. She stopped, changed hands, and continued. Age had changed the terms of physical work. It hadn't canceled the agreement. She heated water on the propane stove and washed the kitchen counter. The stain beneath the Creel came away after 3 passes. When she opened the cupboard above the sink, she found 2 cans of beans, a jar of instant coffee hardened into 1 brown lump, and a sleeve of paper plates printed with blue fish. She laughed once. Leonard had bought those plates despite Judith telling him they were too expensive. They established the theme, he'd said. She threw away the food and saved the plates. A truck came down the road shortly after 1. Judith heard the engine before she saw it. She stepped onto the porch with the broom in her hand. The pickup stopped beside her car. Eugene Luna climbed out wearing a tan work jacket and a cap from the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. Retirement had softened his middle, but he still moved like a man accustomed to uneven ground. A long aluminum ladder was tied in the truck bed. He looked at Judith, the cardboard window, and smoke rising from the chimney. "You waited until I went into town," he said. "I didn't know your schedule. You knew my telephone number. I came to look, with a suitcase, for 3 days." Eugene walked toward the porch. He stopped at the bottom step, giving her the chance to send him away. Judith lowered the broom. "How did you know I was here?" "Doris saw your car turn north. She called me before you reached the road." "Does she report every vehicle?" "Only the ones that belong to stubborn relatives." "I'm not her relative. She makes exceptions." Eugene glanced toward the roof. "You've got flashing loose beside the chimney. I saw the stain." "Storm's supposed to come tonight. I'll put a bucket under it. That works if your intention is to collect rain." Judith stepped aside. Eugene entered without ceremony. He removed his cap and looked around the cabin. The coat on the chair caught his attention. He touched the shoulder, then withdrew his hand. For a moment, his face changed. He'd lost Leonard too, though everyone had treated him as the man who happened to be present when Judith lost her husband. He cleared his throat. "You got the pump going?" "Split coupling." "I've got one in the truck." "Of course you do. I've also got window plastic. I used cardboard, I noticed." He went outside and returned with a red toolbox. Judith watched him kneel beside the well housing. "I can pay you," she said. "No?" "Then take the coupling back." Eugene looked over his shoulder. "It costs $6. That isn't the point." "What is the point?" "The point is I'm not taking on another man who handles things for me." Eugene sat back on his heels. He understood more than Judith had meant to tell him. Doris had probably given him the rough version. Ogallala carried news quickly, and bad family news traveled faster than weather. "All right," he said. "You pay for parts. We work together. I don't touch a paper, an account, or a decision unless you ask me." Judith considered him. "And I decide what happens to the cabin. It's your cabin. It's on county land. It's still your building." There was something in the way he answered, a slight delay before the second sentence. Judith noticed it, but Eugene had already turned back to the pipe. "What?" she asked. What? You hesitated. "I was trying not to start an argument before I fixed your water." "About what?" "About walking away from the place before you've looked properly." Judith leaned the broom against the steps. "I haven't decided to walk away." "Good. I came to close it up." "That sounds similar." "It isn't." Eugene tightened the new coupling. He knew better than to smile where she could see him. They worked through the afternoon. Judith held the ladder, while Eugene climbed to the roof. He replaced 3 loose screws and pressed sealant around the chimney flashing. He found no broad section of rot, only one soft board beneath the eave. "Roof needs attention before winter," he called down. "It doesn't need replacing today." Ryan said the rafters were failing. Eugene stopped working. "When did he come up here?" "He said he checked it last summer." "He didn't." Judith looked up. "How do you know?" "I live half a mile down the shore. The road gate stays locked when nobody's here. I've had the spare key since Leonard died. Ryan had a key, then he never used it. He sent me photographs. I sent those photographs to you." Judith shifted her grip on the ladder. Eugene looked down at her. "Ryan called me 2 summers ago. Asked me to take pictures of the roof, porch, and water line. Said you needed them for insurance. I sent them to him. He must have passed them along. He said he took them." Eugene descended 1 rung at a time. On the ground, he wiped sealant from his fingers with a rag. Maybe he meant he had them taken. He said, "I drove up Saturday and took a look." Eugene folded the rag. Then he lied. The words were simple. They didn't shock Judith. Ryan had told larger lies. Still, this one settled differently. It meant his stories about the cabin had been built from photographs someone else provided. He hadn't seen the floors, tested the well, or climbed the roof. He had described the place as dangerous because he wanted her to stop asking about it. Judith looked toward the lake. "What did he ask you exactly? Whether the roof was beyond repair, whether the dock was insured, whether the cabin could be sold separate from the land. What did you tell him? That I wasn't a contractor, an insurance agent, or a lawyer. Did he ask about the county lease? He asked what happened if the fees weren't paid. And I said I didn't know." Eugene carried the ladder toward the truck. Judith followed. "Why didn't you tell me? I tried to call after that." "You didn't answer. You could have left a message." "I did." Judith remembered deleting several voicemails without listening to the end. That had been during the period when any mention of the lake made her throat close. Eugene tied the ladder down. "I should have kept trying," he said. Judith shook her head. "No, I should have listened." Neither of them tried to rescue the other from that truth. After the window plastic was secured and the pump working, Eugene walked around the cabin with a small notebook. Judith carried a flashlight and wrote her own list. The porch needed a new support beneath the northwest corner. 2 screens had torn. The fireplace mortar had cracked near the hearth. Mice had entered through a gap behind the stove. The dock looked worse than the cabin. 3 boards were missing. 1 post leaned toward the water. The bench where Leonard had collapsed remained at the far end, silvered by weather. Judith stopped where the path met the shore. "I haven't stepped on it since that morning," she said. Eugene didn't tell her she should. He tested the first board with his boot. "Don't use it yet. I'll bring lumber tomorrow. I didn't ask you to rebuild the dock. You asked me to look properly. I asked you to fix a pipe." Conversation grew. Judith almost argued, then saw the corner of his mouth move. "What do you want from this place?" she asked. Eugene looked across the water. Leonard spent 3 summers getting that dock level. Every winter the ice moved it, and every spring he claimed he'd solved the problem for good. "That doesn't answer me. I want somebody here who knows what it meant to him." Judith crossed her arms. "And if I sell the cabin?" "Then you sell it after you know what you're selling." The answer stayed with her. Eugene left before dark. He took the broken pump coupling and promised to bring a receipt for the replacement. Judith heated soup from the supplies she had packed. She ate at the dining table while wind moved through the cottonwoods. The repaired window held. The roof didn't drip when light rain began. She could have driven back to the duplex. The road was still passable, and her bed there was clean. Instead, she opened her suitcase. She made up the narrow bed in the smaller room, shook out Leonard's old quilt, and placed her flashlight on the crate he'd used as a bedside table. Then she carried the fraud packet to the kitchen. The papers contained a list of every transfer the bank had identified. Judith spread them in the date order. She read each line without allowing herself to skip ahead. Ryan had drawn money 4 times during months when he claimed to be paying cabin expenses. One transfer for $3,600 carried the note property maintenance and annual fees. Judith searched the cabin desk. The top drawer held pencils, batteries, and a deck of cards. Beneath those was a folder labeled Lake in Leonard's block handwriting. It contained old receipts, maps, and county correspondence through 2019. Judith found no later receipts. She checked the metal file box under the desk. Nothing. Ryan had shown her annual summaries listing payments for cabin upkeep. She remembered the wording because she'd asked why maintenance cost so much on a place nobody used. County fees went up, he'd said, and I paid Eugene to keep an eye on things. Eugene had never been paid. Judith took out her phone and called him. He answered after 2 rings. What did I forget? Did Ryan ever give you money for checking the cabin? No, not once. Not once. Did you bill him? I never billed anybody. Judith looked at the transfer list. Thank you. You all right up there? Yes. The fire popped behind her. Judith. I'm all right. Bring the lumber tomorrow. She ended the call and turned to a blank page in Leonard's notebook. At the top, she wrote the date. Beneath it, she listed every missing receipt, every claim Ryan had made about the cabin, and every question she intended to ask the county. She photographed the old folder page by page. Then she put the originals back exactly where she'd found them. This wasn't the full plan. Judith didn't have one yet. It was only a decision. She would stay longer than 3 days. She would inspect every repair, open every drawer, and verify every payment herself. If Ryan had neglected the cabin while charging her for its care, she wanted to know how far the lie went. Near midnight, Judith rose to add wood to the fire. The fishing creel sat on the counter beside Leonard's gloves. In the stronger light, she noticed the leather strap had been attached backward after one of its old repairs. The buckle faced the wicker instead of away from it. Leonard had been particular about his fishing gear. He wouldn't have mended it that way. Judith lifted the creel and ran her thumb along the strap. Someone else had handled it. She set it beside the notebook, where she could see it in the morning. At first light, she examined the strap without taking it apart. The leather had cracked near the buckle. Someone had punched a new hole too close to the edge, then threaded the strap through the wrong side. The repair looked hurried. Judith wrote that down too. She felt faintly foolish after she did it. A damaged fishing basket wasn't evidence of anything. Ryan might have pulled the strap loose while moving boxes. A storage worker might have done it. Still, she'd spent 5 years accepting explanations because they arrived in a calm voice. She could afford to be foolish for a morning, if foolish meant looking closely. She made coffee with bottled water and swept the second bedroom. At 8, Eugene's truck came along the road, with boards extending over the tailgate. Doris followed in her own pickup. Judith watched both vehicles stop beside the porch. This is becoming a work crew, she said. Doris climbed out carrying a covered dish and a paper sack. At 71, she still opened the bait shop before sunrise during fishing season. She wore a red quilted vest over a denim shirt, and her short gray hair had been flattened on one side by a wool cap. It's becoming lunch, Doris said. A work crew would have brought more people. I have food. You have canned soup. How would you know? Eugene. Eugene lifted both hands. I said no such thing. You said she heated soup. That's different. Doris walked past them with the dish. She paused inside when she saw Leonard's coat on the chair. Her free hand closed around the paper sack. Then she set everything on the kitchen counter and began removing sandwiches as if she hadn't noticed the coat at all. Judith understood. Doris had spent 7 years keeping her brother present through practical complaints. His windows always leaked, Doris said. One window broke. The others will try. I'm handling it. Doris looked around at the swept floor, the organized papers, and the fire laid for later. Yes, she said. You are. Eugene unloaded the lumber. The 3 of them carried it to the shore, though Doris announced that she had only an hour before she needed to return to the shop. They replaced the first missing dockboard together. Eugene measured. Judith marked the cut. Doris held the board steady on 2 sawhorses. The electric saw wouldn't run because service to the cabin remained disconnected, so Eugene used a handsaw. Judith took over when his shoulder stiffened. You planning to do all 3 that way? Doris asked. Unless you brought electricity in the paper sack, Judith said. Doris handed her a sandwich. By 10, the dock was safe to its midpoint. Eugene tied a strip of orange cloth across the unrepaired section. Judith stood on the new boards and looked toward the far bench. She still wasn't ready to walk there. Nobody asked her to. Kimberly's car arrived while they were putting away the tools. She got out, holding a large white envelope. Judith recognized the county seal before Kimberly reached the porch. "This came to the duplex," Kimberly said. "Certified. The mail carrier caught me as I was checking on the place. You signed for it?" "I didn't know what it was." Judith wiped sawdust from her hands. Kimberly offered the envelope but didn't release it immediately. "Mom, it says urgent." Judith took it inside. The notice ran 3 pages. She read the first twice. The county claimed the shoreline lot associated with the cabin was in arrears. Annual charges hadn't been received for 3 years. Unless the balance was settled, or proof of another lawful interest was submitted, the county intended to take the lot back and require the cabin removed. Judith had 45 days. The amount listed at the bottom was $13,260, including late charges and administrative costs. She sat at the dining table. Doris read over her shoulder. Eugene remained near the door, his cap in both hands. Kimberly said, "Can they do that?" "If it's a lease and it wasn't paid," Judith answered. "But Ryan paid it." "No, Ryan said he paid it." Judith pulled the bank packet closer and found the transfer marked property maintenance and annual fees. $3,600 had left her account that month. Other withdrawals followed the next 2 years. Doris tapped the county notice. "This says their last payment was recorded in early 2023. That's around when he started billing me more." Kimberly sat across from her mother. "I'll call my divorce attorney. This isn't your divorce. He may know somebody. I'm calling the county first." Judith used the number printed on the notice. After several recorded instructions, a woman answered in the land administration office. Judith gave her the account reference and cabin address. The woman's keyboard clicked. "Yes, Mrs. Brady, I have it. I have records showing money was taken from my account for these charges. Do you have county receipts?" "No." "Canceled checks made payable to the county?" "The payments were handled by my financial agent." Another pause followed. "Was that Ryan Chang?" Judith looked at Kimberly. "Yes. He contacted this office twice." "When?" The woman gave 2 dates from the previous year. "What did he ask?" "I'm not permitted to give details from another caller's conversation. He was calling about my property under my power of attorney. The authority on file has since been revoked." "I know. I revoked it. What I can tell you is that no payment resulted from those calls." Judith gripped the pen. "Why wasn't I contacted before this notice? Earlier letters went to the address on file." "Which address?" The woman read an office suite in Lincoln. Kimberly went still. "It was Ryan's former business address." Judith wrote it beneath the date. "I never authorized a change from my home address." The request came with a copy of the power of attorney. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You may pay the balance. You may also submit receipts or recorded documents showing the county's claim is mistaken. If you intend to challenge the notice, that must be received within 45 days. There will be a hearing before any final action. I need a copy of everything on this account. You can request the file in writing. I'll come in. The public counter closes at 4. Judith checked the clock. "I'll be there before 3. She ended the call. Kimberly stared at the address Judith had written. "He changed the mail." "Yes. I didn't know." "I believe you." The words didn't offer as much comfort as Kimberly wanted. She lowered her eyes. Doris folded the sandwiches back into their paper. "What's at the county office?" she asked. "Whatever they have, and after that?" "I don't know yet." Judith took the creel from the counter and placed it on a chair so she could collect her papers. Doris noticed the damaged strap. "That was Leonard's good one. He had a bad one? He had 6. Everyone was his good one when I suggested throwing it away." Judith touched the backward buckle. "Do you remember this repair?" Doris bent closer. "No. Leonard stitched his leather. He hated those punched rivets." "Eugene? He examined it without picking it up. Not his work. Could Ryan have used it?" Kimberly shook her head. "Ryan didn't fish." "That isn't what she asked," Doris said. Kimberly looked at the creel. "I never saw him use it. But he brought things out of your garage before the house sale. He said he was separating family items from junk. Where did he take them?" "A storage unit at first. Then his office, maybe." "I'm not sure. Judith placed the creel back on the counter, one complication at a time. She drove to the county offices with Kimberly. Eugene and Doris stayed behind to finish covering the lumber before the afternoon rain. The clerk at the public counter gave Judith a thick file and a small desk near a window. Judith expected copies of yearly lease bills. Instead, the file began with recent account summaries and several pages carried forward from an older filing system. Some referred to a shoreline occupancy permit. Others called the payment a service assessment. One page used the words private holding, then crossed them out by hand. None of it was clear. The map attached to the notice showed a narrow rectangle around the cabin and dock. It was less than half an acre. Judith had always assumed that rectangle was the entire leased lot. Leonard had never discussed boundaries. He told her the county controlled the shoreline and collected a yearly fee. She hadn't asked what kind. A change of address form sat near the back of the file. Ryan had signed it on Judith's behalf. The signature line read, "Judith Brady, by authorized agent." The new address was his Lincoln office. Judith asked for a copy. She also copied 2 letters the county had sent there. The first warned of unpaid charges. The second requested clarification about the basis of occupancy. Ryan had received both. He'd told Judith nothing. Kimberly read them beside her. He knew this was coming. Yes. He let them send the final notice anyway. Yes. Why? Judith closed the file. That's what I intend to find out. At another counter, she requested old records connected to the cabin address and Leonard's name. The clerk searched, frowned, and searched again. "There are documents under a different reference," he said. "What documents?" "I can't tell from the index. Some older land records haven't been scanned. Can I see them?" "You'll need the legal description." Judith showed him the notice. He shook his head. "That only describes the occupied cabin area. If you're looking for an older filing, I need a parcel description, trust name, or recording number. Would it be in the lease file? If it were, you'd already have it." Judith wrote down what he needed. She and Kimberly returned to the lake with copies, request forms, and no answer. Rain began before they reached Otter Creek Road. Eugene had covered the lumber and gone home. Doris had left a note saying she'd call after closing the bait shop. Kimberly stood inside the cabin, while Judith spread the county maps beside Leonard's old folder. The map from the county showed the cabin's narrow rectangle. An older fishing map in Leonard's folder showed the shoreline, but no property lines. Judith compared them until the lines blurred. "You should come back to town tonight," Kimberly said. "The road could wash out. I'll be fine. You have no electricity. I have propane and wood. The county wants more money than you have. I know how much money I have." Kimberly pressed her lips together. "I could help with part of it." "With what money?" "My savings. You're rebuilding your own life. I helped Ryan get access. You didn't take the money. I stood beside him when you signed." Judith looked at her daughter. Kimberly had spent months waiting for anger. She almost seemed to prefer it to the careful distance Judith kept. "I'm not taking $13,000 from you to pay a charge we don't understand," Judith said. "What if the deadline runs out? Then we use the 45 days. We?" Judith glanced toward her. "You brought the notice." It wasn't forgiveness. Kimberly knew that. It was work, which was something she could do. They ate the remaining sandwiches. Before leaving, Kimberly helped move the second bed away from a damp wall and wrote the county deadline on the kitchen calendar. Judith watched her car disappear down the road. By evening, rain struck the roof steadily. The flashing held. Judith sat at the table with Leonard's folder, the notice, and the creel. She had planned to mend the strap so she could hang the basket without tearing it further. She found a sewing tin in the bedroom and chose a heavy needle. The damaged end wouldn't lie flat. To reach it, she had to loosen the canvas liner where it wrapped over the wicker rim. Judith removed 2 small stitches. The liner shifted, but only on one side. She turned the creel over. Along the bottom, a second row of stitches ran beneath the factory seam. The thread had darkened with age, yet the pattern was even and deliberate. Leonard's pattern. He used the same short double stitch on torn work gloves and canvas tool rolls. Judith ran her finger around the bottom edge. The liner felt thicker there than it should. She carried the creel nearer the lamp. With the point of the needle, she lifted one of Leonard's stitches, then another. The canvas opened less than an inch. Something stiff pressed behind it. Judith stopped cutting and called Eugene. "I need you to come over. In this rain, bring a better light." He arrived 12 minutes later wearing a yellow rain jacket. Water ran from its sleeves onto the porch. Judith showed him the double seam. Eugene leaned close. Leonard did that. I know. They cut the remaining stitches carefully. The false layer pulled free from the bottom. Inside lay a folded sheet of paper wrapped in waxed cloth. A small brass key had been taped to the back. Judith removed the tape without bending it. She unfolded the paper on the table. It was a hand-drawn map of the cabin, shoreline, road, and surrounding ground. The shape extended far beyond the narrow rectangle shown on the county notice. Measurements ran along every side. 4 iron markers were drawn at the corners. Near the bottom, Leonard had written his initials and a date from the summer of 1998. Eugene put on his glasses. This isn't a fishing map, Judith said. No. Did Leonard ever show it to you? No. She held up the brass key. What does this open? Eugene didn't answer at once. He turned the key beneath the lamp, looking at the stamped number near its head. Then he removed his glasses. I heard Leonard mention a box at the Ogallala Bank once, he said. He never told me what was in it. Judith turned the key over in her palm. Which bank? The one on North Spruce. It had a different name then. Why would he mention it to you? He needed a ride into town. His truck was in the shop, and you were working. When? Late summer, maybe 2018. That was a year before he died. Eugene nodded. What did he say? Only that he had to check something in his box. I waited in the truck. When he came out, he told me you'd have the key if you ever needed it. I didn't have it. He must have changed his mind about where to keep it. Judith looked down at the open liner. Or somebody was looking through the house. Rain pressed against the windows. Eugene didn't ask who she meant. Judith photographed both sides of the map and the key. She placed the originals in a plastic food container, then set the container inside her suitcase. The power was still off, and the bank had closed hours earlier. There was nothing more she could learn that night. That didn't stop her from trying. She placed the county map beside Leonard's drawing. The cabin and dock aligned. So did the bend in Otter Creek Road. But Leonard's boundary lines reached into the cottonwoods, followed the shore beyond Eugene's place, then turned inland across ground Judith had always considered county property. Numbers along the edges appeared to be measurements. One line read 412 feet. Another read 508. Small circles marked iron pins. Judith had seen property sketches during the sale dispute over her house. This looked like one, though Leonard's lines were drawn in pencil on the back of an old bait shop invoice. The date bothered her most. Leonard had drawn the map in 1998, before the cabin existed. Judith remembered those years clearly enough. Leonard came to the lake on summer weekends with Eugene. He said they were fishing and looking for the right place to build, once the county released more shoreline lots. Judith believed construction started in 1999. If this map was accurate, Leonard had been measuring the ground before he raised the first wall. She slept poorly. At 7 the next morning, she called the bank. The automated system offered choices that didn't include finding something a dead husband had hidden in a fishing basket. She pressed 0 until a person answered. I have a safe deposit key, Judith said. I believe it belonged to my husband. The employee asked for Leonard's full name and date of birth. Then she asked for Judith's name. Judith heard typing. There is a box associated with those names, but I can't discuss access by telephone. Is it still there? I can confirm the box remains active. My husband died 7 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. Who's been paying for it? Another pause. You'll need to speak with our vault officer. What do I bring? Photo identification, your husband's death certificate, and any trust or estate documents you have. Also bring the key. Judith had the death certificate in a document case at the duplex. She called Kimberly. I'll bring it, Kimberly said. Give me an hour. Bring the copy of the power of attorney too. The revoked one? Yes. Why? Because I want the dates in front of me. Kimberly arrived with the document case, a portable battery pack, and a sack of breakfast biscuits. She found Judith dressed to go, the folded map inside a clear sleeve. What happened? Your father hid a key in the Creel. Kimberly set the food down. What key? A bank key. Judith showed her the map without removing it from the sleeve. Kimberly studied it. Did Dad draw this? Those are his initials. What does it show? That's what I'm going to find out. Kimberly looked toward the Creel. Its loosened liner hung open at the bottom. Ryan sent that back. Yes. Do you think he knew? If he knew, he wouldn't have sent it. The answer gave Judith her first clean satisfaction in days. Not because Ryan had made a mistake, but because something had passed through his hands without becoming his. Kimberly touched the false seam. I remember him asking about keys after Dad died. Judith looked up. When? While we were cleaning out the filing cabinet, he found a safe deposit receipt. What receipt? I don't know. An old payment slip, maybe. He asked whether Dad had a box. What did you tell him? That I'd never heard of one. Did he ask me? I thought he did. He didn't. Kimberly pulled out a chair. He searched the garage that week. He said he was looking for insurance papers. Judith remembered Ryan carrying file boxes into the dining room. She'd been grateful he knew which papers mattered. The Creel had hung from a peg above Leonard's workbench. Maybe Ryan had seen it. Maybe he hadn't. Either way, he'd eventually placed it in storage, searched enough of it to damage the strap, and dismissed it. Judith put the key in her purse. They drove into Ogallala in Kimberly's car. Eugene followed in his truck because Judith asked him to come. That request mattered to him. He didn't show it. He only said he needed to buy screws in town anyway. The bank occupied a tan brick building near the courthouse. Its sign had changed twice since Leonard's visit, but the vault remained in the original part of the building. A woman named Marlene met them in a glass-walled office. She wore a navy cardigan and reading glasses attached to a silver chain. Judith gave her the key, identification, and death certificate. Marlene checked the stamped number, then left to retrieve older records. They waited beneath an air-conditioning vent that made the room too cold. Kimberly rubbed her hands together. What if it's empty? Then it's empty. What if Ryan already opened it? He didn't have the key. He had the power of attorney. Judith took out the revoked document. Ryan's authority had begun in late 2019. It included banking, investments, and access to safe deposit boxes. Her stomach tightened. He could have asked the bank to drill it, Kimberly said quietly. Wouldn't there be a record? There should be. Eugene shifted in his chair. He didn't know which bank. He could have found out, Kimberly said. Judith looked through the glass at Marlene, speaking with an older employee near the teller stations. This was how Ryan had operated. He'd made himself the person who could ask questions on Judith's behalf. Every door opened because she'd signed a paper telling people to open it. Marlene returned with a yellow signature card inside a protective sleeve. Mrs. Brady, the box was rented in both your names. Judith leaned forward. I never signed for a box. Marlene turned the card. The signature was Judith's. She recognized the date. It came from a stack of trust and estate papers Leonard had brought home in late 1998. She'd signed where he marked small pencil crosses. What did he tell you it was? Kimberly asked. Retirement paperwork. Marlene pointed to a line near the bottom. You're listed as joint renter with independent access. No one has entered the box since September of 2018. Not Ryan? No. Did he ask? I found one inquiry from his office in early 2020. The employee noted that the caller didn't have a box number or key. No access was granted. Judith breathed out. Why is it still active? The rent was prepaid from a small linked deposit account. There's enough to cover several more years. Can I open it today? Yes. Marlene looked toward Kimberly and Eugene. Only a renter may enter the vault. You can bring the box to a private viewing room afterward. Judith followed her through a steel gate. The vault smelled of metal and cool dust. Rows of narrow doors covered 3 walls. Marlene led her to a box near knee height. Judith inserted the brass key. Marlene used a second key beside it. Both turned together. The door opened. Marlene slid out a long gray box and placed it on a cart. I'll wait outside the viewing room. Take as much time as you need. The room contained a table, 3 chairs, and no windows. Judith set her purse down and lifted the lid. A large brown envelope lay inside. Nothing else. Leonard had written her name across the front. Judith Brady. Personal. Beneath it, in smaller letters, he'd added, Bring Eugene if there's trouble with the lake. Judith stared at the words. Even after his death, Leonard had expected Eugene to be nearby. She carried the box to the office. Kimberly stood when Judith entered. Eugene saw the writing on the envelope and removed his cap. He named you, Judith told him. Eugene read the smaller line. I don't know why. We're about to. Judith sat between them and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 items. The first was a folded legal document inside a clear protective cover. The second was a sealed white envelope with Judith's name written in Leonard's hand. The third was a survey drawing prepared by a licensed surveyor in 1998. Judith unfolded the legal document. At the top, in dark type, were the words, "Warranty Deed." She knew enough from the sale of her house to understand that much. The grantors were a married couple whose names she didn't recognize. The grantee was the Brady Family Shore Trust, with Leonard Brady named as trustee. The description covered 4.37 acres along the north shore of Lake McConaughey. Judith read the number again. 4.37 acres. Not the narrow cabin rectangle shown on the county notice. Not a small leased shoreline lot. The document carried signatures, a notary seal, and a recording stamp dated August of 1998. Kimberly leaned over the table. "Does that say Dad bought the land? It says the trust received it." "What trust?" "I don't know." Eugene traced the property description without touching the page. The measurements matched the map from the Creel. Judith placed Leonard's hand-drawn map beside the professional survey. The shapes aligned. So did the iron marker locations and the shoreline curve. Her eyes moved to the county notice. Proposed reversion of leased shoreline lot. Then back to the deed. 4.37 acres, together with all rights and interests belonging to the land. "Could this be a copy?" Kimberly asked. "It is a copy," Judith said. "The original would be in the county records if it was recorded. The county clerk couldn't find it. She searched Leonard's name and the cabin address. This is under a trust." Eugene sat down. "Leonard owned it before we built anything." Judith looked at him. "This paper says a trust owned it. It hasn't been checked." "Right. You said Leonard was waiting for county lots. That's what he told me. You helped him build here for 3 years." "I did. You never knew?" "No." Eugene sounded wounded by the question, but Judith needed the answer more than she needed to spare him. "Did Doris know?" "I don't know. What about Douglas?" Douglas was already gone from the lake by then. Judith remembered Leonard's brother leaving Ogallala after a family fight. Nobody spoke clearly about what happened. The story had been reduced over the years to money trouble, a son-in-law, and a lake lot lost in court. She looked at the sealed white envelope. Leonard had known something nobody else did, or something he'd asked them to hide. He'd recorded a deed under a private trust, prepaid the bank box, drawn the boundaries by hand, and sewn the key beneath a fishing creel's liner. This wasn't forgotten paperwork. It was a plan. Marlene knocked once and opened the office door. "I'm sorry to interrupt. The bank's legal department asks that I clarify something. We can confirm these papers were stored in Mr. and Mrs. Brady's box. We can't confirm whether the deed remains legally effective." "I understand," Judith said. "You'll need a title professional or the county recorder. The county says I have 45 days. Then I'd make certified copies before you leave." Judith did. She paid for 3 sets. One stayed in her document case. One went into the bank box with the original deed and survey. She kept the third to submit with her challenge. She didn't surrender the original. At the county counter, Judith filed a written objection to the reversion notice. She attached the certified copy, the survey, and Leonard's hand-drawn map. The clerk accepted the packet and stamped Judith's copy. "This pauses final action until review," he said. "You'll receive a hearing date. Who reviews the deed?" "Our recorder's office and county council. If there's a title question, they may refer it out. How long? I can't promise. I have a 45-day notice. The objection protects the deadline." That was the first useful sentence anyone at the county had given her. Outside, Judith stood on the courthouse steps with the stamped packet against her chest. The cabin might not be sitting on land the county could take back. Ryan might not have drained the money while neglecting a worthless lease. He might have been asking questions about property Judith already owned without knowing it. The difference was enormous. It was also still unproven. Kimberly touched the sealed envelope in Judith's document case. "Aren't you going to read Dad's letter? Not on a courthouse step." "Where then?" Judith looked north, toward the lake, at his table. They returned before sunset. Doris's pickup was parked beside the cabin. She stood on the porch with her arms folded, waiting. "You went to the bank without me," she said. "We didn't know you needed to come. I didn't know either until Eugene called." Judith unlocked the door. Inside, she placed the certified copy of the deed at the center of the table. Doris removed her glasses from her vest pocket and read the first page standing up. Her expression didn't change when she reached the trust name. "You knew," Judith said. Doris set the paper down. I knew Leonard bought land. For how long? Since he bought it. Kimberly pulled out a chair. Eugene remained beside the fireplace. Judith didn't sit. You let me believe it was leased. Leonard asked me to. He's been dead 7 years. I know how long my brother's been dead. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know what he finally put in your name. I saw the purchases. I witnessed some payments. I never saw the deed. You never thought I should know there was a deed? I thought you did. Judith looked at Eugene. He shook his head. Doris turned toward him. You helped build the cabin. Don't tell me you never asked, I asked. Leonard said county lot. That's what he told everybody. Not everybody. Doris took off her vest and hung it beside Leonard's coat. No, she said, not me. Judith opened the document case and removed the sealed letter. Then you can listen. She sat in Leonard's chair at the head of the table. Kimberly sat to her right, Eugene to her left. Doris took the chair across from her. Judith slipped one finger beneath the envelope flap. The letter filled 6 handwritten pages. Leonard had dated it in September of 2018, the month he last entered the bank vault. Judith began aloud. Judy, if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to explain it properly. That's my fault, not yours. She stopped. Leonard rarely called her Judy in front of other people. He used it at home when he was tired, sorry, or trying to make her laugh. She continued. He wrote that the land around the cabin wasn't leased. The county collected a service charge connected to shoreline access and old maintenance agreements, but the 4.37 acres had belonged to the Brady family shore trust since 1998. He'd purchased the property over 3 summers. The first payment came in 1996. The second followed a year later. The final payment cleared the remaining balance, and the sellers signed the warranty deed. Leonard had used cash from weekend repair work, fishing guide jobs, and the sale of equipment he'd inherited from his father. He hadn't taken money from their household savings. Judith looked up. What equipment? Doris answered. 2 tractors, a grain wagon, and tools from the old place. Leonard told me those brought almost nothing. He told you he used the money to pay debts. What debts? Doris looked at the letter. The land. Judith returned to the page. Leonard's explanation began with his brother Douglas. In 1991, Douglas owned a lake lot east of the Brady cabin site. During a difficult year, he signed financial authority over to his daughter's husband. The son-in-law used that control to arrange loans against Douglas's property, then forced a sale when Douglas objected. The family fought in court. Douglas lost the lot, most of the sale proceeds, and contact with his daughter. Leonard had watched his brother become a guest in every place he'd once considered home. Afterward, Leonard made a decision that seemed excessive at the time. If he ever secured lake property, no in-law would control it through ordinary household finances. He would keep it in a private trust, leave Judith as the sole successor, and store the records where a person searching bank statements wouldn't easily find them. Doris spoke quietly. He was ashamed of what happened to Douglas, so he kept the land secret from his own wife. He was afraid you'd tell the children. I might have. You would have, Leonard had written on the next line. Judith almost heard him saying it. She read on. He didn't distrust Scott or Kimberly when he created the trust. They were young then. He distrusted what could happen later, after marriages, debts, illness, or grief changed the people around them. He knew Judith considered that gloomy thinking. She often told him a man could worry himself into an early grave. At that line, nobody moved. Leonard explained that Judith was named the trust's sole successor and beneficiary. If he died, the land passed under the trust terms without becoming a family asset for anyone to divide. He'd kept the original trust papers with a titled attorney who later retired. The deed and survey went into the bank box. Judith's joint signature gave her access, even if she never remembered signing. The key was sewn into the creel because Leonard believed Judith would keep the things that mattered to him, even if nobody else did. Judith lowered the page. Ryan had almost defeated that part of the plan by putting the creel in storage. Then he'd completed it by sending the basket back. She read the final page silently before deciding to speak it. If there's pressure to sell, don't let the loudest person name the value. Ask Doris what she saw. Ask Eugene to help you keep the place standing while you decide. I built the cabin for weekends, but I bought the ground so you'd always have somewhere no son, daughter, banker, or in-law could put you out of. Eugene stared at the floor. The last paragraph was shorter. I should have trusted you with the truth while I was alive. Secrecy can protect a thing and still hurt the person it was meant to protect. I'm sorry for that. The land is yours. Make it a home if you need one. Judith folded the pages along their old creases. For several seconds, only the refrigerator clock in Kimberly's battery pack made a faint electronic sound. Doris reached across the table. Judith didn't take her hand. You watched him pay for it, Judith said. Yes. Tell me exactly. Doris withdrew her hand and sat straighter. The first summer, Leonard paid the sellers at my shop because their bank was closed. He brought cash in an envelope. I counted it with them at the bait counter. How much? $8,000 that day. Why cash? The husband didn't trust checks. Leonard didn't mind because he'd sold one of the tractors for cash. And the other payments? I saw the second. The final one happened at the bank with a notary. Leonard showed me the receipt afterward. Did you sign anything? I witnessed a purchase memorandum the first year. My copy may still be in the shop safe. May? I haven't looked at it in almost 30 years. You'll look tomorrow. Yes. Doris accepted the instruction without offense. Why did Leonard tell everyone the county owned the land? Kimberly asked. Because questions stop when people hear the word lease, Doris said. Nobody fights over something they think can be taken back. Judith looked at the reversion notice. That part worked too well. Eugene picked up the survey copy. The county may have carried the service account as a lease after their records changed, or somebody gave them reason to, Judith said. Kimberly opened her handbag and removed a thick folder. I need to show you something. Judith recognized the colored tabs from the divorce documents. When did you get that? My attorney sent the final bank tracing yesterday. I brought it this morning, but then we found the deed. Why didn't you mention it? Because I wanted to understand it before I tried explaining. Judith waited. Kimberly placed a summary page beside Ryan's withdrawals. The family investment fund was his business account with a different name printed on the statements. He started using your money when his consulting company lost 2 clients. To invest, to cover payroll, office rent, and his credit cards. He kept expecting a large contract to fix the shortage. Did the contract come? No. Kimberly turned the page. Then he started moving newer money to cover older withdrawals. Every time he showed us a gain, he had to take more somewhere else to make the numbers look possible. The transfers lined up with months Ryan had been unusually attentive. Furnace filters, grocery deliveries, long conversations about conservative investing. He hadn't helped Judith because he planned the theft from the beginning. He'd helped until access became normal, then used her money when his own position weakened. Once he started, every later decision protected the first lie. Why sell my house? Judith asked, though she knew part of the answer. His business account was nearly empty. He also owed back taxes and had borrowed against our house. Your sale would have given him enough to pay several things and keep the fund statements going another year. But Kimberly found the accounts. He didn't know I was looking. Judith turned to the county pages. And the cabin? Kimberly removed printed emails from the folder. Ryan had written to the county from his business address. At first, he asked for annual charges and whether the cabin structure could be sold without transferring the shoreline interest. The county replied that its records were unclear. One older index suggested private ownership beyond the occupied cabin area. They asked Ryan to provide a deed or trust information. He had neither. His next email asked what would happen if Judith stopped paying. The answer stated that the county could begin a reversion process under its existing account classification. Any competing ownership claim would have to be supported by recorded documents. Ryan changed the mailing address 6 days later. He wanted the county to take it? Eugene asked. Kimberly read from the tracing notes. He wanted Mom to believe there was nothing left here. If the county removed the cabin or forced a cheap structure sale, the false maintenance charges would be harder to question. Doris looked toward the Creel, and if he found the trust. He searched for it, Kimberly said. There are 3 charges to document retrieval companies. He also asked the bank about the box. Judith touched the backward buckle. Ryan had pulled at the Creel while searching Leonard's garage. He might have felt the thick liner and missed its meaning, or the strap might simply have snagged when he threw the basket into storage. Either way, he knew there might be older property records. He didn't know where. What changed? Judith asked. Why send the Creel back now? The divorce inventory required him to return family possessions still in his control. His lawyer sent whatever remained in the storage unit. Ryan probably never saw the final box. That was complete enough. Ryan needed Judith to depend on him because dependence gave him access. He needed the cabin to look worthless because attention would expose the unpaid charges. He redirected the notices because a deadline created quiet pressure. He searched for Leonard's records because the land might be the one asset he hadn't reached. When he failed to find them, he treated the cabin as something that could be allowed to disappear. Judith gathered the bank tracing, county emails, deed copy, survey, and Leonard's letter into separate folders. Kimberly watched her. "What are you going to do?" "Find Doris's purchase memorandum. And Ryan, I'm not calling him. He'll hear about the objection, then he can hear it from the county." Judith placed the original letter inside the document case. Until that evening, she'd thought Ryan took what he could find. Now she understood he'd also worked to make sure she never looked for what he couldn't. She locked the documents in her suitcase before going to bed. The next morning, Doris opened the bait shop an hour late. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Back soon," which in Doris's business could mean 10 minutes or most of the day. Minnow tanks bubbled along the back wall. Rows of brightly colored lures hung above bins of sinkers and hooks. Doris led Judith through a curtain into the office. The safe stood beneath a shelf crowded with old tax binders. Its paint had chipped around the handle. "I keep meaning to clean this out," Doris said. "You've had nearly 30 years. I've been busy." Eugene leaned against the doorframe. Kimberly stood beside Judith with her phone ready to photograph anything they found. Doris opened the safe and removed 2 metal cash boxes, a cloth bank bag, and a stack of envelopes tied with twine. The purchase memorandum was in the 4th envelope. Its paper had yellowed at the edges. Leonard's name appeared beneath the sellers' names. Doris's signature filled the witness line. The document stated that Leonard would purchase a lakefront tract in 3 payments. It included a legal description beginning at an iron marker near Otter Creek Road. Judith compared it with the survey. The numbers matched. Behind the memorandum were 2 handwritten receipts. The first acknowledged $8,000. The second brought the total paid to $17,500. "There should be one more," Doris said. She searched the envelope again. "The final payment may have gone directly through the bank." "Can you swear you saw these signed?" Judith asked. "I can swear I counted the first payment. I watched Leonard and both sellers sign that page. And the second? I was present." Judith handed Kimberly the papers for photographs. Doris watched her. "You don't trust me." "I trust that memories change. Paper changes less." "That sounds like Leonard. Today it sounds like me." Doris nodded once. At the bank, they made certified copies of the memorandum and receipts. Doris signed a written statement before a notary describing what she had witnessed. She didn't decorate it. She gave dates, locations, names, and amounts. When she didn't remember a detail, she said so. Judith read every line before Doris signed. By noon, they were back at the county records office. This time, Judith brought the legal description, trust name, recording date, and instrument number from the deed. The clerk no longer searched by cabin address. He entered the information and found an image in the older index. "There it is," he said. Judith leaned toward the monitor. A scanned page displayed the same recording stamp as the copy from Leonard's box. The image was faint, but the instrument number, notary seal, and property description were visible. "So it was recorded," Kimberly said. "The index shows a recorded instrument," the clerk replied carefully. "I can provide a certified copy. I can't determine its present legal effect." Judith appreciated the distinction. What else was filed with it? The clerk opened the surrounding entries. A certificate of trust had been recorded the same day. Another document transferred the seller's remaining interest in an access road. A survey plat followed 2 weeks later. Judith requested all 3. The certificate of trust was only 4 pages long. Leonard was named original trustee. Judith was named successor trustee and sole beneficiary upon his death. Scott and Kimberly weren't listed. No son-in-law was listed. The certificate gave the trustee authority to occupy, maintain, lease, or sell the land. It also stated that no agent acting under an ordinary financial power of attorney could alter the trust or transfer its property without specific written authority referring to the trust. Ryan's document didn't refer to it. Judith read that section 3 times. "Does this mean his power of attorney never reached the land?" Kimberly asked. The clerk stepped back from the counter. "That's a legal question, but the words are right there. The hearing officer will interpret them." "Who's the hearing officer?" Judith asked. The clerk checked the case sheet. Anthony Jimenez is assigned as deputy recorder. He's also the county's outside title attorney on older shoreline matters. When can I speak with him? He won't discuss a disputed filing privately before the hearing. Good, Judith said. The clerk looked surprised. Judith didn't want a reassuring conversation. She wanted the documents examined where every claim had to be entered into the same record. She requested the tax history next. That search took longer because the trust's account had been carried under an older parcel number. Once the clerk found it, he printed more than 20 pages. Taxes on the 4.37 acres had been paid every year since the deed was recorded. Leonard had paid them through 2019. After his death, automatic withdrawals from a small trust account continued without Judith knowing. The latest payment had cleared 3 months earlier. What about the $13,000 in arrears? Judith asked. The clerk opened a second account. That's attached to the cabin occupancy reference. On the same ground? It appears so. One account says a trust owns the land and pays taxes. The other says, I lease it from the county. That conflict is why a hearing was scheduled. When? He printed a notice. 3 weeks from Thursday. Judith looked at the date. It fell within the original 45 days. The clerk stamped every certified copy and fastened the pages with metal seals. Judith carried them out in a new document case she bought from an office supply store across the street. It cost $28. She kept the receipt. They spent the afternoon at the property. Eugene used the survey measurements and an old steel tape to locate the first iron marker. It sat beneath 6 inches of soil near the road, exactly where Leonard's map showed it. Judith cleared the ground with a hand trowel. The second marker stood among cottonwood roots. The third was near a weathered fence post beyond the cabin. They couldn't reach the fourth without cutting through thick brush, so they left it for another day. Kimberly photographed each marker with the survey page beside it. Her phone recorded the location and time. Judith made a separate list. The papers, the trust certificate, the payment history, Doris's witnessed memorandum, and the physical markers all agreed with one another. None had yet been accepted at the hearing. Nobody with authority had declared the title valid. But they no longer had one surprising paper from a fishing creel. They had a chain. 2 days later, a white sport utility vehicle turned into the cabin drive. A woman stepped out wearing low boots and a light raincoat. She carried a leather folder, but no handbag. Judith was painting the replacement window frame. Eugene was repairing the porch support. The woman stopped a respectful distance away. Mrs. Brady? Yes. My name is Nancy Burgess. I develop lakefront property around Keith County. Judith set down the brush. How did you get this address? The objection you filed is public. The legal description caught my attention. That was quick. I pay attention for a living. Eugene stood but stayed near the porch. Nancy looked toward the lake, then at the trees beyond the cabin. I won't waste your time. If the deed is upheld, you have one of the larger privately held stretches along this part of the shore. If, yes, my offer would be contingent on clear title. What offer? Nancy opened the folder. The first page named a purchase price of $685,000. Judith thought she'd misread it. She checked the words printed beneath the numerals. $685,000. Kimberly arrived from the dock, carrying a bucket of old nails. She saw Nancy and stopped. This is my daughter, Judith said. She isn't part of the sale. Nancy accepted the boundary without reaction. My company would purchase the entire tract, she said. We'd remove the cabin and divide the shoreline into 3 home sites. Eugene's hammer remained still. What happens to the dock? Judith asked. It would be replaced. The cottonwoods, some would remain. Which ones? That would depend on access and building plans. Judith closed the folder. I'm not signing anything. I don't expect you to today. I'd like permission to have an appraiser view the land. No. Nancy studied her. I understand this is sudden. No, you understand the filing is sudden. You don't understand anything else. That's fair. Nancy took a business card from the folder and placed it on the porch rail. The offer expires after the hearing, but I can revise the date if the county review takes longer. Why would you offer that much before the title is clear? Because if it becomes clear, other buyers will call. Nancy looked toward the cabin. They'll tell you the building adds value. It doesn't, not to a developer. The shoreline and road access carry the price. To you, to the market. Judith held the folder out. Nancy didn't take it. That copy is yours. I didn't ask for it. You'll want a written number when relatives begin offering advice. Judith looked at her. Nancy gave a small, knowing nod. She had seen valuable land rearrange families before. After she drove away, Kimberly picked up the business card. 685,000. I can read. You could replace everything Ryan took. And lose the cabin. You could buy another home. This may be another home. Kimberly returned the card to the rail. I'm not telling you to sell. You were about to. I was about to say you have a choice. Judith looked at the new window frame, the repaired porch, and the dockboard stacked beside the path. A week earlier, she'd come intending to close the cabin and surrender the lease. Now, a developer wanted to pay more than $500,000 for land Leonard had placed beyond ordinary family control. The money mattered. Pretending otherwise would have been dishonest. It could give Judith a safe retirement, a proper house, and freedom from counting grocery costs. But Nancy's offer also clarified what would disappear. The cabin would be removed, the shoreline divided, the cottonwoods reduced to whatever fit around 3 construction sites. Judith carried the offer inside and filed it separately. That evening, Doris called from the shop. A man came in asking about the Brady land. What man? He didn't give a name. He asked when Leonard bought it and whether you planned to sell. What did he look like? He didn't come himself. He called. Did you recognize the voice? No. But he knew the deed was under a trust. Judith looked at Kimberly. Did you tell Ryan? Kimberly's face changed. No. Could your attorney have? The deed may have appeared in the divorce case system if Ryan's lawyer still monitors property connected to the old power of attorney. Judith's phone rang before Kimberly finished. Scott's name appeared on the screen. Judith let it ring twice, then answered. Mom, he said, why am I hearing from somebody else that Dad owned 4 acres at the lake? Who told you? That doesn't matter. It matters to me. A land broker called. She said there's an offer. Nancy Burgess called you? No, another broker. Mom, is the land really worth almost $700,000? Judith sat at Leonard's table with the trust certificate beneath her hand. The title hasn't been decided, but if it is, what are you planning to do with our property? Our property? You know what I mean. Family property. No, Judith said. I know what the trust says. I'm flying in. I didn't ask you to. I'm still Dad's son. That hasn't required a flight in 9 years. Scott went quiet. Judith didn't fill the silence for him. I'll be there Friday, he said. After the call ended, Kimberly opened her laptop. There's something else. A notice had arrived through the divorce attorney's online file. Ryan's lawyer requested copies of any newly discovered trust records connected to Judith's former financial power of attorney. Ryan knew the deed existed. He didn't yet have the contents of Leonard's letter, Doris's signed statement, the certified trust certificate, or the complete tax history. Judith closed the laptop. Don't send him anything. Can we refuse? He can ask at the hearing. Judith took the brass key from her pocket and placed it beside the creel. The hidden deed had given her more than an answer. It had given her a legal position Ryan's authority had never reached. For the first time since the bank showed her the missing money, Judith held the document that made him come to her. Scott arrived Friday afternoon in a rental car that was too low for the rutted road. He stepped out wearing office shoes and looked at the mud along the doors. You could have warned me, he said. About the road? About all of this. Judith was sanding the new porch post. She finished the section beneath her hand before setting the paper down. Scott had Leonard's height and Judith's habit of tightening his jaw when he expected resistance. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him in person. At 40, he carried himself like every hour had already been assigned. Where's the deed? He asked. Safe. Can I see it? You can see the certified copy at the hearing. I'm your son. That doesn't make you the recorder. Scott glanced through the cabin door. The creel hung temporarily from a nail beside the kitchen counter. Is that where you found it? Inside the liner. How did Ryan miss it? He thought it was junk. Doris came around the cabin carrying a box of window hardware. Scott gave her a brief hug. Aunt Doris, did you know about the land? I knew Leonard bought it, and nobody told us? He didn't want you told. Scott looked at Judith. Why? His reasons are in a letter to me. Do I get to read that? Not today. He walked to the edge of the porch, then back. I heard there's an offer for almost $700,000. There is. So, what happens if the title clears, I decide? By yourself? Yes. That's not how family property works. It is when the family doesn't own it. Scott let out a breath through his nose. Dad wouldn't leave us nothing. He didn't leave you nothing. He raised you. He paid for college. He helped with your first apartment and your first car. That isn't what I meant. I know. His face reddened. I'm not asking you to hand me a check. I'm asking to be included. You flew here after a broker named a Price. You didn't come when the roof leaked. I didn't know you were staying. You didn't ask. Scott looked toward the water. I thought the cabin was a lost cause. So did I. That was useful to Ryan. Doris set the hardware on the porch rail. Scott turned to her. What exactly did Ryan send back? Doris answered before Judith could. The plainness of it left Scott with no softer version to choose. I'm sorry about the money, Mom. Are you? Of course I am. You asked how I could have signed it over. I said that badly. You said what you thought. Scott lowered his voice. What do you want from me? At the moment, nothing. That's cold. No, it's clear. He stayed for another hour. He inspected the dock, asked what the repairs cost, and took photographs of the shoreline when he thought Judith wasn't watching. Before leaving, he asked for Nancy's written offer. Judith refused. You think I'm going to interfere? I think you're going to advise me before you understand my position. I understand plenty. Then come to the hearing. Scott booked a hotel in town. Kimberly arrived the following evening. She came alone and carried no overnight bag. Ryan's in Nebraska, she said. Judith kept sorting screws into glass jars. How do you know? He used a credit card connected to an old travel alert. My name hasn't been removed from the notifications. Where? Lincoln yesterday. Ogallala this morning. Eugene stopped fitting a new handle onto the screen door. Has he contacted you? He asked. No. Judith placed a bent screw in the discard tin. He contacted the county. Kimberly showed her an email forwarded by the divorce attorney. Ryan had requested permission to appear at the title hearing as Judith's former financial agent. His written statement claimed he held relevant knowledge about the cabin, trust, and discovery of the deed. He says the deed may be part of disputed marital records, Kimberly said. It was recorded 17 years before you married him. I know, he knows too. He's trying to get into the room. The hearing is public. I mean into the decision. Judith closed the screw jar, then let him. Kimberly looked alarmed. Mom, he'll make you sound confused. He's done that before. He'll say you approved the transfers. The hearing isn't about the transfers. He'll bring them up if he thinks it helps him. Then he'll bring them up. Judith had spent years answering Ryan's explanations one at a time. He supplied a reason. She tried to disprove it. Before she finished, he supplied another. At the hearing, he could choose his whole story. She wanted him to choose it where it would be recorded. During the week before the hearing, Judith didn't contact him. She indexed the documents in her case. Each tab matched a line on a one-page list. Recorded warranty deed, certificate of trust, survey plat, property tax history, county service account, change of address request, Doris's memorandum and witness statement, bank access record, revoked power of attorney, Ryan's county emails. Leonard's letter stayed in a separate envelope. Judith made one copy for Anthony Jimenez and marked the passages concerning ownership. She didn't intend to hand the whole letter to anyone unless it became necessary. Eugene finished the safe section of the dock. He replaced the leaning post and repaired the bench at the far end. Judith walked out there the evening before the hearing. She stood beside the place where Leonard had fallen. The boards were new beneath her feet, but the view hadn't changed. Water moved through bands of late sunlight. A fishing boat crossed near the opposite shore. Eugene stayed near the path. Judith put one hand on the bench. Then she turned and walked back. The hearing took place on a Thursday morning in a county meeting room behind the recorder's office. Rows of stackable chairs faced a long table. A microphone stood at its center. The walls held framed maps of Keith County from different decades. Judith arrived early with Kimberly and Eugene. Doris came straight from the bait shop wearing her red vest. She carried the original purchase memorandum inside a plastic folder. Scott sat in the second row. He had a legal pad on his knee. Nancy Burgess occupied a chair near the aisle. She greeted Judith with a nod and didn't approach. Anthony Jimenez entered through a side door, carrying 2 binders. At 52, he had close-cropped gray hair and the patient expression of a man who expected every page to matter eventually. He introduced himself as deputy recorder and title counsel assigned to the dispute. He explained that the hearing would address the county's reversion notice, the competing deed record, and any party claiming an interest. "The room is open," he said. "The record is formal. Speak clearly and don't speak over one another." Ryan arrived 2 minutes before the scheduled start. Judith recognized his footsteps in the hall. He entered wearing a dark blue suit and carrying the brown leather portfolio he used during meetings with her bank. His hair had been cut recently. He looked rested. Kimberly went rigid beside her mother. Ryan saw them and slowed. "Kim," he said. She didn't answer. His eyes moved to Judith. Mrs. Brady. For 6 years, he'd called her Mom. Judith gave him nothing to work with. No greeting, no visible anger, no question about where he'd been. Ryan took a place at the end of the front row. Anthony turned on the recorder and stated the date, parcel references, and names of those who intended to speak. A county land administrator summarized the unpaid cabin account. The county's records treated the occupied shoreline area as a leasehold subject to reversion. Judith's objection had produced a deed recorded under a separate trust reference. Anthony asked whether anyone asserted an interest against Judith's claim. Ryan stood. "I do." He approached the table with his portfolio. "On what basis?" Anthony asked. "I served as Mrs. Brady's financial attorney, in fact, from 2019 until late 2025. During that period, I managed the cabin account and communicated with the county on her behalf. Your authority has been revoked. Yes, but actions lawfully taken before revocation remain relevant. What interest are you claiming today?" Ryan opened his portfolio. "I'm asking the county not to accept a document of uncertain origin as proof of private ownership. I also ask that decisions made during my lawful management be recognized." "Which decisions?" "To treat the cabin as a lease structure, to stop putting money into an unsafe property, and to prepare it for disposal." Judith watched him choose each word. Anthony said, "Were those decisions authorized by Mrs. Brady?" "Yes." Kimberly turned toward Judith. Judith kept her hands still. Ryan continued, "Mrs. Brady was struggling after her husband's death. She gave me broad authority because she didn't want to handle these matters. I acted based on the records available." "Did you pay the county charges?" "I attempted to clarify them before paying. The account was inconsistent." "Did you inform Mrs. Brady of the delinquency?" "I discussed the property's financial problems with her." Judith remembered no such conversation. Ryan knew she would say that. He was relying on the years when he could describe a discussion and make her question herself. Anthony looked at the deed copy. "What makes its origin uncertain?" "It appeared after Mrs. Brady accused me of financial misconduct. The deed was recorded in 1998. A paper carrying that date was found recently. That doesn't establish when the copy entered the fishing basket or who placed it there." Eugene shifted in his chair. Judith touched his sleeve without looking at him. Ryan went on. "The basket came from a storage unit connected to assets I managed. It passed through several hands. Mrs. Brady didn't know about this supposed trust for nearly 3 decades. It wasn't disclosed during Leonard Brady's estate process. It wasn't listed in her financial statements. It wasn't mentioned when she gave me authority over all property and accounts." "Are you alleging the deed was fabricated?" Anthony asked. Ryan paused. He wanted the accusation without the burden of making it. "I'm saying its authenticity should not be assumed. Are you alleging Mrs. Brady fabricated it?" "No. Someone else?" "I can't know that yet." "Then state what you do claim." Ryan glanced toward Nancy, then Scott. "The land has attracted a substantial offer. That gives several people a motive to reshape old records. Mrs. Brady is being influenced by family members who weren't involved in her finances and don't understand the decisions she previously made." Scott stopped writing. Doris leaned back in her chair. Ryan placed a copy of the old power of attorney on the table. This authority included real property, safe deposit boxes, trusts, and financial claims. I relied on it. If the cabin parcel was privately owned, then my authority extended to its management. If it was leased, my decision to let the account lapse was within the same authority. Either way, the county shouldn't disregard my actions because Mrs. Brady now regrets them. There it was. Ryan had committed himself to both versions. If the land was leased, he had intentionally allowed the deadline to approach. If it was owned, he claimed Leonard's trust had fallen under his control. He also claimed Judith authorized both. Anthony asked, "Is that your complete position?" Ryan looked at Judith for the first time since he began. She lowered her eyes to the document case, letting him believe she had nothing ready beyond the surprising paper from the Creel. "Yes," Ryan said, "that is my complete position." Anthony turned toward Judith. She didn't open the case yet. "I'd like Mr. Chang's documents marked first," she said. Anthony numbered each page Ryan had submitted. The power of attorney became Exhibit 1. Ryan's emails became Exhibits 2 through 5. His written statement became Exhibit 6. Only after the last page was marked did Judith open her case. She handed Anthony the certified warranty deed. "This came from the county's own recorded index," she said. The original copy was found inside Leonard's fishing creel. The key to his bank box was sewn beneath the liner. Ryan leaned toward the microphone. "That doesn't establish validity." Anthony held up one hand. Judith gave him the certificate of trust, survey plat, property tax history, bank access record, and Doris's witnessed purchase memorandum. Anthony compared the instrument numbers first. Then he matched the notary registration on the deed with the county's archived commission book. He placed the deed beneath a document lamp. A faint seal appeared near the lower corner. "This impression matches the notary seal registered in 1998, he said. He checked the seller's names against the previous deed. "The chain of title is unbroken. The sellers received the tract in 1987. They conveyed the entire interest to the Brady Family Shore Trust in 1998. No later transfer appears." Ryan stood. "The trust was never disclosed to me." "That isn't a defect in the title," Anthony said. "I held authority over Mrs. Brady's trusts." Anthony opened Ryan's power of attorney. "This document grants general financial authority. The recorded certificate of trust requires separate written authority, specifically identifying the Brady Family Shore Trust. Do you have that?" "No, but Mrs. Brady signed broad language concerning real property." "That isn't what I asked." Ryan looked at Judith. She knew I was managing the cabin. Judith spoke into the microphone. "I knew you claimed to pay its expenses. I didn't authorize you to surrender it, sell it, hide its mail, or stop paying charges you took money to cover." Ryan's calmness began to thin. "You approved the investment arrangement?" "This hearing isn't about your investment arrangement. You can't separate the two when you're relying on records discovered after making fraud accusations." Anthony turned to the tax pages. "These aren't recently created records. The trust paid property taxes for more than 20 years. The payments match the parcel description in the deed and survey." He looked at the county land administrator. The cabin service account was incorrectly carried forward as a leasehold after the county changed record systems. It doesn't create county ownership of privately deeded land. The administrator nodded. "Then the reversion notice should not have been issued." "No," Anthony said. "It should not." He signed the finding. "The county's reversion claim is dismissed. Judith Brady, as recorded successor trustee and sole beneficiary, holds authority over the parcel." Ryan reached for his papers. "What about actions taken while my authority was valid?" Anthony closed the binder. "You had no authority over this trust. Your actions concerning its property carry no legal effect." Judith removed Leonard's letter. "There's one thing I want read into the record." She handed Anthony the marked copy. He read the passage stating that the land belonged to Judith alone. Then he read Leonard's request that Eugene help her keep the cabin standing if trouble came. At the back of the room, Eugene lowered his head. Anthony finished with Leonard's final instruction. "Make it a home if you need one." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Ryan closed his portfolio. Judith stopped him before he turned away. "You'll communicate with me through the attorneys handling the missing money." "Judith, I never intended for any of this to happen. You intended each transfer when you made it. I was trying to recover the losses." "With my house." Ryan glanced toward Kimberly. She didn't move toward him. Judith continued. "You have no authority here. You don't call the county for me. You don't ask Kimberly for documents. You don't come to the cabin." Ryan left without answering. Outside, Scott waited near Judith's car. "So, that's it?" he asked. "The trust cuts us out? The trust gives me the land. Are you selling?" "No." "You haven't even considered what that money could do for the family." "I considered it carefully. I'm part of the family." "Yes." "You aren't an owner." Scott looked toward Kimberly, hoping for support. She said, "She answered you. He left for Denver that afternoon." Judith didn't chase him, and she didn't close the door forever. She simply left his claim where the documents left it, with nothing beneath it. Nancy met Judith beside the courthouse steps. My company will raise the offer to $760,000. No, you don't want time to consider it? I've had time. Nancy returned the papers to her folder. If you change your mind, call me. I won't, but thank you for dealing with me directly. That summer, Judith repaired the cabin in the order it asked. Eugene helped replace the soft roof board. Doris found matching cabinet hinges at the bait shop. Kimberly came on Saturdays and followed Judith's lists without taking over. They patched screens, painted the porch, and cleared brush from the fourth survey marker. Judith paid for each part and kept every receipt. When the electrician restored service, she stood beside the kitchen switch. "Go ahead," Eugene said. Judith turned it on. The lamp above Leonard's table filled the room with warm yellow light. Kimberly brought the last boxes from storage in August. She carried them inside one at a time. "Where do you want these?" Judith pointed toward the second bedroom. "You can use that room when you stay." Kimberly set down the box. "Are you sure? You can have a key, not authority, not access to my accounts." "A key?" Kimberly nodded. "That's enough." It wasn't instant forgiveness. Some Saturdays they worked without discussing Ryan. On others, Kimberly answered questions Judith had been too tired to ask. Trust returned through small things, arriving when promised, keeping copies, and accepting no as a complete answer. Judith moved out of the duplex before autumn. Her pension covered ordinary expenses now that she had no rent. The clear title gave her security she could see on paper, but the useful part of ownership appeared in daily tasks. She stocked the pantry. She planted herbs beside the porch. She put clean sheets on both beds. The restored trust was transferred into her name alone, with no financial agent attached. The mended creel took longer. Judith removed Ryan's rivet, softened the leather, and stitched the strap the way Leonard had taught her. She replaced the false liner, but left one corner loose enough to show Kimberly where the key had been. When it was finished, she hung it beside the front door. If stories about reclaiming dignity after family abandonment matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. On the first cool evening of September, Judith carried 3 mugs of coffee to the dock. Doris sat on the repaired bench. Eugene watched a red bobber drift beyond the reeds. Judith lowered Leonard's old line into the water and rested both hands around the rod. Behind them, the cabin windows glowed through the cottonwoods. Later, Judith would set the mugs in the sink, lock the door, and switch on the porch lamp. There was no suitcase waiting to be packed. Her clothes filled the dresser, her groceries filled the cupboards, and her own key turned cleanly in the lock. The cabin stood warm behind her, the creel hung by the door, and the last light rested on water that was still, finally, hers.